death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both.
People rushed outside and vomited.
They touched Miss Ledford on the breast with cold metal pliers. And if you listen to the tape, you'll hear those pliers being replaced in a toolbox a few seconds later.
He was the oldest son of a wealthy mother and father.
Though he accepted the blame for his barbaric crimes, cannibalizing, even crudely lobotomizing some of his victims, Dahmer nonetheless asked for forgiveness.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it.
Serial killers have claimed countless victims, leaving behind shattered families and immense pain. Have you ever imagined what it feels like to be hunted by a monster? The thought alone is enough to send chills down your spine. Driven by deeply disturbed minds, they've committed some of the most horrific crimes in history. Let's delve into the depths of their depravity and uncover the chilling, gruesome details of their brutal crimes.
He was the oldest son of a wealthy mother and father.
Few cases in the history of courtroom justice are as unsettling as that of Tsutomu Miyazaki. Born into a wealthy Japanese family, his life appeared normal on the surface. However, hidden beneath that facade was a terrifying and sinister darkness.
Of his interrogation that was used against him. Of course, there's nothing to the extent that would get me banned off of YouTube, but this video is going to go over some pretty grotesque things, so strap yourselves.
His descent into madness began in the late 1980s, when he carried out a string of horrific crimes that would leave a permanent scar on the nation. Miyazaki targeted young girls, drawing them away from safety and into his twisted world. Over just 1 year, from 1988 to 1989, he kidnapped, murdered, and mutilated 4 innocent children. The details of his crimes are almost too horrific to describe. He not only took their lives, but also desecrated their bodies in ways that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Remove the terms that exceed YouTube policy.
A wealthy family who operated a successful newspaper company in Japan, which of course is discontinued now. Although his parents were almost too busy to be involved in his life, they were extremely strict on him and pushed for him to be successful. But his timid and introverted nature was a major obstacle in his life, and he was born with a condition where his hand joints and wrists were fused together. This heavily affected Miyazaki's performance in school.
What made Miyazaki's crimes even more terrifying was the methodical nature of his actions. He meticulously documented each murder, treating them like tasks to be checked off a list. In a deeply disturbing move, he also sent letters to the victims' families, cruelly taunting them with details of their children's suffering. This was a man who took pride in the fear and anguish he inflicted.
Victims were Marikano, Masami Yoshizawa, Erika Namba, and Ayoko Nomoto. He burned the rest of Marikono's bones and put the ashes in a box, along with some of her.
When Miyazaki was finally captured, the horrifying scope of his crimes was fully exposed. Inside his home, police uncovered a disturbing stash of videos and images that offered a chilling glimpse into his deranged psyche. His trial became one of the most notorious in Japan's history, as the courtroom turned into a stage for justice against someone who appeared more like a monster than a man.
Find that in trial, Miyazaki denied ever making the alias name Yuko Imada, and that it was something he just...
Throughout the trial, Miyazaki displayed little remorse. His behavior was erratic, and he frequently seemed disconnected from the seriousness of his actions. Despite his defense team's efforts to argue otherwise, the court held him fully accountable for his horrific crimes.
Disgusted at his crimes. His obsession with anime had labeled him as the otaku murderer and began the stigma of anime fans across Japan. The case had tainted his family name, and his father was so disgusted by it that he didn't even want to pay for it.
In 2008, almost 20 years after his arrest, Tsutomu Miyazaki was executed, offering a measure of closure to a case that had gripped and horrified Japan for years. While justice was ultimately served, the wounds left by his crimes continue to linger.
Guilty on all counts. The jury coming back with that verdict in the trial of Zetas cartel boss Marciano Mian Vasquez.
Yeah, that verdict coming in just about 30 minutes ago. Our Stephanie Cerna joins us live from outside the federal courthouse with the details. Steph?
Well, the lawyer for Vasquez talked to us just a few minutes ago, saying he was surprised by the verdict, given there was no direct evidence. Now, Vasquez on trial for the murder of hundreds of men, women.
Marciano Vasquez, a notorious member of the Los Zetas cartel, has been handed 7 life sentences for his crimes, which include the brutal killings of at least 29 individuals. This story unfolds in the brutal world of drug trafficking in northern Mexico, where Vasquez, known as Chano, climbed the ranks from hitman to plaza boss. His violent reign stretched from 2009 until his capture in 2015, leaving behind a legacy of bloodshed and terror.
Marciano Millan Vasquez is facing murder, conspiracy, and drug distribution charges. Gustavo Rodriguez faced the same charges, but as part of a plea deal for a reduced sentence, he agreed to testify against.
Paraded for the cameras, these men are suspected of killing dozens of people in the Gulf Coast state of Veracruz.
During the trial, witnesses gave harrowing accounts of how Vasquez used an axe to dismember a young girl in front of her parents. He reportedly laughed as he burned her remains and coldly told the father, "So you'll remember me." This was just one of many savage acts that revealed his complete lack of compassion. The jury found him guilty on numerous charges, including murder, drug trafficking, and involving minors in drug operations, cementing his reputation as a merciless enforcer. Vasquez's grip on the Piedras Negras drug corridor made him a key figure in trafficking vast amounts of drugs, such as marijuana and cocaine, into the United States.
The testimony of its cooperators.
11 different people who were familiar with the defendant, were familiar with the activities he was involved in, testified, but there was a bunch of direct evidence too that's been omitted in the coverage, and the jury heard about that, and that was a big point during the trial, and we think they considered that.
His brutal tactics weren't merely about maintaining power, they served as a warning to anyone who might defy him or his cartel. U.S. Attorney Richard Durbin described him as a man who operated without mercy, bringing immense suffering to his victims and their families. Marciano Vasquez's story is a horrifying chapter in the ongoing battle against organized crime, leaving a lasting impact on both sides of the border.
Don't eat the paper, bud. It's the bones for you. Buddy, sit.
Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo appeared to be an ordinary couple from Canada, but behind closed doors they were hiding a horrifying truth. Together they committed crimes that stunned the nation. Their story begins in the late 1980s when they met and quickly became inseparable. However, their relationship soon spiraled into darkness as they began fueling each other's disturbing and violent impulses.
Homolka told the court that Bernardo said it was time to bring home another young girl to be kept as a sex slave. She said he decided that the afternoon of Thursday, April 16, 1992 would be a good time because he believed there would be a lot of young virgins in the street.
Bernardo had already gained infamy as the Scarborough rapist, responsible for a series of sexual assaults on women throughout the Toronto area.
Canadian couple Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka.
When Bernardo met Carla, the two discovered a shared thirst for violence. Together they orchestrated and carried out the kidnapping, rape and murder of 3 young women, including Carla's own sister, Tammy Homolka.
While Teal was held in jail on the rape charges, Carla Homolka went into hiding.
Great. Bernardo is seen here cheering the runner along the Marijuana Pope.
Evilness with both these people is so extreme. These people were animals.
What drove this seemingly clean-cut couple to their appalling crimes?
There was Carla Homolka raping, torturing right alongside her husband, and she seemed to be enjoying it.
Were Bernardo and Homolka born to kill?
Tammy was their first victim, drugged and assaulted by the couple on Christmas Eve in 1990. The attack was so savage it resulted in her death, which they initially staged to look like an accident. But this horrifying act was only the beginning.
Over the next 36 hours, Paul Bernardo assaulted his victim repeatedly.
Over the following 2 years, Carla and Paul went on to abduct and torture 2 more young girls, Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. They recorded the assaults on video, exposing the full extent of their depravity and cruelty.
Shortly thereafter, it became very clear that something was terribly wrong.
All quiet, perfect little town.
Leslie's fate had been sealed.
The couple's reign of terror eventually came to an end. In 1993, Bernardo was arrested, and the horrifying truth about their crimes was finally revealed. Homolka made a deal with prosecutors, agreeing to testify against Bernardo in return for a reduced sentence, a decision that sparked widespread public outrage.
Death of her sister Tammy, but claimed that she'd been a battered wife and an unwilling accomplice.
Bernardo received a life sentence and remains behind bars. Carla, on the other hand, was released in 2005 after serving 12 years and has since tried to maintain a quiet life, but the shadow of her past still lingers.
Though he accepted the blame for his barbaric crimes, cannibalizing, even crudely lobotomizing some of his victims, Dahmer nonetheless asked for forgiveness.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it.
Jeffrey Dahmer's story begins in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he was born on May 21, 1960. By the time he graduated from high school in 1978, Dahmer had already developed a disturbing obsession with animal corpses and was struggling with severe alcohol abuse. Just weeks after finishing school, he carried out his first murder.
We started looking around a little bit and make sure there were no other victims or anybody else in the apartment, and there were human heads and bones and
He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, and after a night of drinking together, attacked him with a dumbbell when Hicks attempted to leave. Dahmer then concealed the body, burying the remains in his backyard.
Nonetheless asked for forgiveness.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it.
Several years passed before Dahmer killed again. After a stint in the army, he returned home and sank deeper into alcoholism. By the mid-1980s, he was luring men to his apartment, where he would drug, assault, and ultimately murder them.
My name is Rita Isbell, and I'm the oldest sister of Errol Lindsay. Whatever your name is, Satan. I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control.
What's really been puzzling me is how come I just didn't know anything about this. I pretty much was doing things in my own little world. Amazingly, all the times that I should have been caught, I never was. Do you think that maybe Satan was involved?
Chilling, never before heard prison phone calls between the infamous serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer and his father are now seeing the light of day thanks to a new...
Dahmer's crimes involved gruesome acts of dismemberment and even cannibalism. His reign of terror ended on July 27, 1991, when one of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, escaped and alerted the police. When officers entered Dahmer's apartment, they were confronted with a nightmarish scene, photos of dismembered bodies and human remains scattered throughout the space.
which is a normal thing, because that's your job. You know.
You don't think I'm having sex?
Dahmer was arrested and eventually confessed to the murders of 17 young men. His trial began in January 1992, during which he claimed insanity, but the jury found him both sane and guilty. He was sentenced to 15 life terms. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was killed in prison, bringing a grim chapter in criminal history to a close.
Did you at any time ever use an ice pick? No, sir. You struck Miss Lamp with a sledgehammer. Do you recall the sledgehammer which was introduced? Yes, sir, I recall it.
Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, infamously known as the Toolbox Killers, embarked on a horrifying spree of rape, torture, and murder during the summer of 1979, a dark chapter marked by unimaginable cruelty. Bittaker, born in Pennsylvania and possessing an IQ of 138, met Norris, a native of Colorado, while both were incarcerated at the California men's colony in San Luis Obispo. Despite their contrasting roles, Bittaker as the calculating mind and Norris as the physical force, they bonded over a shared fascination with sadism and began spinning disturbing fantasies about their future crimes.
Bittaker was working as a machinist at a manufacturing plant in Burbank during a strike when he was arrested. The ex-convict testified at a National Labor Relations Board hearing that he once brandished a replica of a .45 automatic while driving.
Apparently they neglected him quite a bit as well. There was never enough food in the house, he'd rarely get new clothes. He said his parents would often blame him for things he hadn't done as well. The door on the passenger side. They modified it and installed a folding bed. And underneath it, they stored a cooler to keep drinks in, which was a big part of their plan to lure teenage girls into the van. But next to the coolers there was also a toolbox, complete with pliers, a sledgehammer, and even ice picks. They named their van the Murder Mac.
Following their release on parole in late 1978 and early 1979, the pair launched a horrifying spree. They preyed on young girls, some as young as 13, abducting them in their van, ominously dubbed Murder Mac.
Lucinda, or Cindy Schaefer, was leaving a church meeting at Redondo Beach. She was 16 years old, blonde, and had blue eyes. As she was walking home, Bittaker and Norris spotted her and drove up to her.
Whether walking home or hitchhiking, the girls had little chance against the deadly duo. Once inside the van, their ordeal turned into a living nightmare as Bittaker and Norris used ordinary tools, pliers, ice picks, and screwdrivers to carry out acts of unimaginable torture, ending in brutal death.
13 years old. Norris and Bittaker, the two girls, were thrown over an embankment. Jackie and Leah were reported missing by their families, but the police treated this as a runaway case, which is something that happened a lot in the 70s. So many missing people cases were treated as runaways, losing the critical first few hours when it's a lot easier to trace back the missing person's steps and locate witnesses. This reminds me of the case of Pamela Hobley and Patricia Spencer, which we covered a few videos ago. They also disappeared without...
Over the course of 5 months, Bittaker and Norris took the lives of at least 5 teenage girls: 16-year-old Lucinda Lynn Schaefer, 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall, 15-year-old Jacqueline Doris Gilliam, 13-year-old Jacqueline Leah Lamp, and 16-year-old Shirley Lynette Ledford.
But soon enough, he told the police everything about the abductions, how they forced the girls into the van or lured them in with drugs and alcohol.
The killers didn't merely take their victims' lives, they documented their torment. Bittaker took Polaroid photos of the assaults, and the pair recorded the suffering on audio tapes. When the tapes of Shirley Ledford were played in court, they moved many to tears, including prosecutor Stephen Kay, who described Bittaker and Norris as worse than Manson.
Driving my girlfriend in a stolen car. Nobody at work or school, nobody at home rather, home or school, had asked me what I'm going to do after graduation. I had no idea in the world. I was just drifting through life. Nobody was helping me figure out which way to go.
The duo's reign of terror ended when Norris, whether out of guilt or fear, confided in a fellow inmate about their horrific crimes. That inmate reported the confession to authorities, resulting in the arrests of Bittaker and Norris on November 20. As part of a plea deal, Norris agreed to testify against Bittaker, who was sentenced to death on March 27, 1981. Although executions were suspended in California, Bittaker spent more than 30 years on death row, continuously filing appeals until he died of natural causes in 2019. Norris, who was sentenced to 45 years to life, died in February 2020, just 2 months after Bittaker. The remains of Lucinda Schaefer and Andrea Hall were never recovered, leaving their families without the closure they so desperately sought. It's crucial to remember that behind each of these stories is a pursuit of justice. While it may take time, justice ultimately prevails, honoring the memories of the victims and ensuring that these tragedies are never forgotten. Thank you for accompanying us on this somber journey.